Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Brothers and sisters, we continue our synopsis or summary of the Quran, inshallah ta'ala, this Ramadan 2020, April 26. And the Hijri, of course, is the third day of Ramadan, 1441. The third juz from ayat 253 to Surah Ali Imran, verse 91 or 92. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah 253, He discusses how He placed the prophets at different levels. And He preferred some over others. Some of them Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to them, others Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them great statuses, great levels, and all of them are great in the sight of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, do not لا تفاضلوا بين الأنبياء, do not try and prefer some of the prophets over others. In other words, don't say the Prophet Muhammad is better than this prophet or that prophet, but each prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His knowledge and His wisdom, had given each a special status. And Isa, the son of Maryam, He gave him the Holy Spirit. He supported him with the Ruh al-Qudus. This is Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, if Allah willed, they would not have fought. The people, the followers would not have fought afterwards throughout the years, but however, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does what He wills in His profound divine wisdom. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, addresses the believers, "O you believe, spend from that which Allah has given you before a day comes where there is no transactions. You cannot purchase yourself or save yourself from the fire." And this is why we today we have opportunity to do good deeds, just small things we can do. Just praying can build eternal bliss for us in paradise. Saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, different things that we do today are very easy, but in the hereafter, we will never have an opportunity to do those good deeds. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the greatest ayah in the Quran, ayah 255, ayah al-Kursi. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, He describes Himself and His greatness and the inclusiveness and profoundness of His knowledge in this surah. In this ayah, Allah says, Allahu la ilaha illa al-hayy al-qayyum, the living, the one who gives life, the qayyum, self-sufficient, the one who gives that everything else He gives, that is standing on its standing based on the power of Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah describes how neither slumber nor sleep overcomes Him, and no one can intercede without His permission. And He knows everything about His servants, that which before them and behind them, and they have no knowledge about Him except that which He gives them. And that is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has encompassed everything in knowledge and in power, and He is above everything. And as we know, the kursi, the chair, or the footstool, as they say, the chair, it dominates the heavens. It reigns over the heavens, all the seven heavens, the thousands of years travel, the first of which all the billions of stars lie in the kursi. If you were to compare it to the seven heavens to the kursi, it's like a ring. The seven heavens would be like just simply a ring thrown into the open desert, and the kursi to the throne of Allah is like a ring thrown into an open desert, and Allah is above all of His creation. And then Allah, He says that there is no compulsion in religion. In other words, no one is forced to become Muslim, but after they become Muslim, it's not permissible for one to leave the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah has given great warning for apostation, as He will mention in the end of this juz. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that He is the wali, He is the protector of those who believe, and from His protection is from His wilayah, His special wilayah. And this is a special wilayah or protection of His servants, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of their souls. Allah is the Rabb al-Alameen. He takes care of all of His creation, believers and disbelievers, His foes and His friends. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the friend of the believer, and from that He gives them guidance and light, and that is part of that Allah is Al-Hayy, so He gives life through the revelation to those to the muttaqeen, and from those who believe in Him. And the more one believes in Him, the more they receive from that light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Taghut, those deities, those false deities, they bring their allies from the light into the darkness, and they will be from the fire forever. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions one of the great Taghut, and that is Namrud, and his argument with Ibrahim, and how Ibrahim overcame him, and he claimed that he was God and he is the one who gives life and takes it, and he tried to demonstrate that through killing a slave and giving the other life, allowing the other to stay alive. Ibrahim a.s. he overcame him in debate, saying, Allah brings the sun from the east, let you bring it forth from the west, and he was silenced and overcome. And Allah does not guide the wrongdoers or oppressors, and that was because he was a great oppressor and a great mushrik. And zalimeen includes oppression to Allah, which is shirk, and oppression to the creation. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the story of Uzair, how he journeyed out and he saw the destruction, the town that was destroyed, and he said, how can Allah bring this back? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him a lesson, a 100-year lesson, and caused him to die, and then brought him back. He preserved his food and his drink and his riding beast. All this to teach him a lesson. He allowed him to see how Allah brings death to life, and that lesson, all that 100-year lesson, was for him to understand that Allah is able to do all things, and there's nothing that Allah is not able to do. وَإِذْ قَالَ Ibrahim. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions also the story of Ibrahim of asking Allah how he brings life to death, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to take 4 birds and cut them into pieces and put each on a mountain, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to call them, and they will come to you hastening. And this is Allah, and know that Allah is mighty and wise. And this is all reinforcing the same concept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part of our faith and our belief and our understanding, and it's also clear from what is displayed from the heavens and the earth that Allah is able to do all things, and there's nothing that there's no limits to His ability. And no matter how long it takes you to understand that, it's worth the time, like the story of Uzair alayhi salam. And also then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions addresses the believers and telling them and giving the example of those who spend in the way of Allah, how Allah multiplies, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies those good deeds. And He gave a metaphor of a corn, how Allah the corn, how a person would spend كَمِثْلِ حَبَّةٍ أَنْبَتَتْ سَبْعَ سَنَابِلٍ, and Allah is giving the example how He multiplies the good deeds to 7-fold or to 700-fold, and as we know in the authentic hadith, every good deed is multiplied, and from the mercy of Allah, 10-fold to 700-fold. As far as fasting and patience, then is it without account. And Allah is wasi'un alim, is generous and all-knowing. الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And those who spend, Allah is praising those who spend and they do not follow up the charity with harmful speech and making the poor feel bad. And Allah is saying that it's better to say something kind than to give charity and then do what you call men, or express favor over a person. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding us not to destroy our good deeds, not to destroy our sadaqah with favoritism, or making people feel that we have a favor over them, or reminding them of the good things that we've done. It is haram to remind someone, I've done this for you, I've done that for you. And this is one of the deeds that nullify This is one of the actions that nullify the good deeds. And also one of the things that nullify good deeds is riya, or showing off. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Basically, it means that people are not seeking the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what they do. May Allah purify our intentions and make everything we do sincerely for His sake. And Allah gave an example of the ones who spend for His sake, seeking His face and His pleasure, is and seeking to تثبيتا من أنفسهم كمثل الجنة, is as a garden at the top of a mountain, exposed perfectly to the right amount of sun, and how it would produce so much good. And then He gives an example of how a person who spends his for other than the sake of Allah, how it's like a man who had a garden and he put so much effort into it, and then it was overcome by a whirlwind with a fire, and it burnt up everything he put forward. And this is an example of people who do things in life not for other than the sake of Allah, and how that will not benefit them in the least. And this is why it's very important for us to always go back to Allah, beg Allah to accept our deeds, and remind ourselves before we do things, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. I want to do this for the sake of Allah. And after you finish, to make istighfar. And this is the wisdom of making istighfar after good deeds, like for example salat, or even other acts of worship. And as we're in Ramadan, at the end of Ramadan, we give the zakat al-fitr, and that will purify our good deeds. And this is from Allah's protection and preservation of the good deeds. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us not to give charity from the low quality, the goods that have low quality. Only we should give things that we're willing to take. We should not give things that we ourselves would not take. That is not the kind of charity that is expressive of trying to achieve the highest levels. We should try to achieve the highest levels of piety and give from that which is pleasing to Allah, and something that we want ourselves, that we would be pleased to take ourselves. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the promise, He gives us His promise that He made to His believers, and the promise that Shaitan makes, but he would not keep his promise. He says Shaitan promises you poverty and commands you to do immodest acts. So this is what he reminds those who, for example, want to seek halal provision, or want to get married, or Shaitan always interrupts or comes in between them in the action, reminds them of poverty. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Wallahu ya'idukum maghfirah, Allah promises you forgiveness and bounty. And Allah has the highest characteristics to back up His promise. Shaitan will always, and he will always, has always broken his promise. But many people believe in the promise of Shaitan, but they do not believe in the promise of Rahman. Even though Allah promises us again and again throughout the Quran of bounty and forgiveness, many of us still allow the negativity to overcome us. And this is something that we have to fight against. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah says, لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. Before that, ayat 271, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes that if you give charity in the open so that people can follow your footsteps and you get the reward, فَنِعِمَّ, it's a great thing, it's a beautiful thing. وَإِن تُخْفُوهَا, if you hide your charity and you give it to the poor, then it is better for you. So it's okay to do good deeds in the open, but it's better to do good deeds in secret, and Allah is aware of what you do. Allah khabirun bima ta'malun khabir. And Allah reminds the Prophet ﷺ that it is not his obligation to guide people, but Allah guides whom He wills. And whatever you spend for the sake of Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ayat 273, explains to us who deserves the sadaqah. It is for the poor people, those who are so humble and they do not beg, they do not, but they're so needy. You would think but they have honor and self-respect, They don't go asking, you should go out and find these people to give them charity, because most people, because of their humility and their self-dignity, they don't ask, but they need, and the sadaqah is for them primarily, but also for others. And then Allah praises those who spend at night and by the day, in open and in secret, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After that, Allah addresses the issue of riba. Ayat 275, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He warns severely against interest and usury, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove all of the barakah billah, and the person will never benefit. Usually, most people, whoever involves in riba, this is people through experience, they know they would lose their wealth, or even the economies that are based upon interest will have experienced major economic problems, and there will be no barakah, no blessing, and nor increase. It will always end less than the person, and the person would never know what happened to his wealth. This is, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He allowed the person to take his capital, but not more than his capital. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "O you believe, establish the prayer and give zakah. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and those who believed and did righteous deeds, establish the prayer and give zakat, they will have their reward with their Lord, and there is no fear or no grief upon them." And Allah repeats this a lot in the Quran: no fear and no grief. And this is something that the believer experiences when he dies: no fear for what he's advancing towards, and no grief for what he's leaving. And it shows that the riba, these major sins, have an effect, if you leave them, as a major good effect, a major positive effect on your at the time of death, of dying. And if a person indulges in these acts without making tawbah, it could have a major effect on and cause him to have an evil death. Or you believe, fear Allah, and leave that which is left from riba. If you do not, then prepare yourself for a war. So Allah has raised war against. Allah will wage a war against those who, Allah and His Messenger, against those who use interest. And this is why you see a lot of the things happening in the world, because of the economies that are based upon interest. Allah is waging war against these countries or the individuals, except those who repent. And know, وَاتَّقُوا, this is the ayat, as some scholars say, ayat 281, the last ayat that was revealed in the Quran. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ, and fear a day that you will return in it to Allah, and then each soul will be rewarded for what it has done, and they will not be wrong in the least. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ayat 282, mentions the longest, by consensus, the longest ayah in the Quran. This is the longest ayah in the Quran. Page 48, ayat 282, and it's an entire page, and it deals with the laws related to and the rulings related to taking a loan, that we should write it down, and we should bring witnesses over, and those who cannot write, then someone should be brought to write for him, and no one should take advantage of the weak and the illiterate. وَاسْتَشْهِدُوا شَهِيدَيْنِ مِنْ رِجَالِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, فَإِنْ كَانَ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ الْحَقُّ سَفِيهًا, if the person's weak, he has a right, and he's not able to operate correctly for himself, then someone else should fill it in for him and bring two witnesses from the men. And if you cannot find two witnesses from a man, then for a man and two women, مِمَّنْ تَرْضَوْنَ, from people whom you're pleased with. And this means this is an indication that the witnesses have to be people who are pleased with. In other words, they have to be people who are righteous and not known to be liars and things of this nature. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the last three ayats, the most very important ayat in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, to Allah belongs, in ayat 284, to Allah belongs that which is in the heavens and on earth. If you openly express what is in your souls, or you keep it hidden, Allah will hold you accountable for it. And this ayat was, Allah will punish whom He wills, and He forgive whom He wills, or punish. يُعَذِّبُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَغْفِرُ لِمَن يَشَاء. And this is something. This ayat was very heavy on the Sahaba, because they asked, how can we be held accountable for the thoughts that we have and the things that lie in our chest and in our hearts. They were afraid, because this is something that you can't control. The Prophet ﷺ told them to say, "Sami'na wa ta'na," we hear and we obey. And once they said we hear and obey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mercy upon them and sent down the following ayat, that the messenger believes in that which was revealed upon him from his Lord, and the believers. So the Sahaba submitted, even though they weren't able to comprehend every the logic behind the ayat, but they knew it's from Allah. And this is the state of the believer. He doesn't put his logic or his doubts above Allah and His Messenger. He submits to whatever Allah and His Messenger says. مَا كَانَ قَوْلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَا كَانَ قَوْلُهُمْ إِلَّا أَن يَقُولُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. We hear and we obey. إنما كان قول المؤمنون إذا دعوا إلى الله ورسوله يحكم بينهم أن يقولوا سمعنا وأطعنا. The statement of the believer is, when they're called to Allah and His Messenger's rule, is to say we hear and we obey, and these are the true believers. They say we believe in Allah and His angels and His books and His messengers. We make no distinction. And again, this is part of what I was discussing before, not separating that which Allah commanded us to keep together. We're not separating between Allah and His messengers, nor the messengers from each other. Islam is the only way of life that accepts every single prophet and all the books, and this is why the believers, inshallah, are headed towards bi'idhnillah, paradise, because they accepted all the truth from Allah. And this is the best state to die in. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not help. So this ayat abrogated these two ayat 285 and 286 abrogated the ayat 284, that Allah will hold you accountable for what happens, what takes place in your chest. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Allah has risen from my ummah the obligations of that which take place in their hearts. There's no sin, and the thoughts you have and the feelings you have, as long as you don't express them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ali Imran is the third surah in the Quran, and Imran is from the offspring of Harun, and he is the father of Maryam alayhi salam, and his wife is Hinna, the mother of Maryam, Maryam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts Alif Lam Mim, Allahu la ilaha illa hu al-hayyul qayyum. Again, Allah mentions Hayy and Qayyum, Hayyul Qayyum, the ever living and the one who gives everything stability, Al-Qayyum. So He is free from every need, and He is the one that all creation needs Him. And then from this Hayy, He gives life. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the greatest source of life, which is the revelation. And He mentions Nazza alayka al-kitab bil-haqqi musaddiqan, the book we sent down the book, and it is musaddiqan, it confirms that which came before it. And Allah sent down the Torah and Injil. So Allah mentioned the Torah, Injil, and He mentioned the Quran, and He called it the Furqan, the criterion between truth and falsehood. And then Allah gave severe warning to those who disbelieve in His ayat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He mentions that He molds you in the womb as He wills. So there's two lives, the two types of life that Allah is dealing with: the life of the physical life, molding in the womb, and then the life of the soul that takes place through reading the books and believing in the revelation. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the type of ayat in ayat 7, Al-Imran. He mentioned the type of ayat that He revealed, and He mentioned that there's some of the ayat that are muhkamat, the rehearsed and the clear rehearsed verses that basically that represent the most important, the universal concepts of the religion, and others are mutashabihat, or they have more than one meaning and they could be misunderstood. And Allah put that there for a reason. And He says, for those who have sickness in their hearts, then they would follow these ayat. So the Quran is a guidance for the muttaqeen, and then also the evil that lies in the heart, the Quran will cause those hearts, those that are sick and are not seeking truth, it will cause them to go astray as a punishment. So the Quran is a living book, and it deals, and as you come to it if you come to it with purity, it will be a means of guidance for you. And if you come to it with a sick heart seeking evil, then Allah has put ayat there to be a punishment for those who take some of the book and leave others and follow the mutashabihat, the unclear verses, and leave the well-rehearsed verses. And this is the problem what happened to the people of the book. They left the well-rehearsed verses, which is the predominant amount of verses, and then they they're seeking a justification for shirk and for polytheism and paganism, and this is what they found. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us that the rasikhun, those who firmly established in knowledge, they say we believe in it all. So they take the mutashabihat and they put them in line with the muhkamat. In other words, the mutashabihat have multiple understandings. They take the understanding that is in line with the overall predominant concepts of Islam, and that way they don't go astray. And this also applies to hadith. And they say we believe in it is all from our Lord, and they also pray that Allah keeps their hearts firm. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا, ayat 8. Do not let our hearts go astray after you have guided us, and give us from yourself a mercy. Indeed, you are the Wahhab, the one who gives it gives freely without even the blessings being earned. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the disbelievers, and that they will not, their wealth or our families will not benefit them in the least, and they will be the fuel of the fire. And He gave an example of Pharaoh and those who came before him, how they denied the signs of Allah, and Allah took them and seized them and punished them with a severe punishment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Prophet ﷺ to tell the disbelievers that they will be overcome and they will be gathered to the fire, and indeed evil abode, that is ayat 12. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an example of two parties, and this is in the Battle of Badr, ayat 13. Allah says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ آيَةٌ فِي فِئَتَيْنِ, how Allah is showing how He gives victory to those who obey Him over the disbelievers, and how Allah gave victory to the Sahaba and gave them His support on the day of Badr. Indeed, that is a sign for those of insight. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ayat 14, explains that the dunya has been made fair seeming to people, but the hereafter is better. People love the different kinds of adornment in this life, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Wallahu indahu husnul ma'ab, He has the best return. And Allah says, should I not tell you something is better than that? All that what the dunya has, the world has to present you, to offer you, for those who have taqwa with their Lord. This is the best part, that it's with Allah, and this is the lowest part of the existence, and that is the highest part of the existence. Pure wives, and the best thing about paradise is, He said, gardens under which rivers flow, and purified wives, and the best is the pleasure of Allah, and Allah is aware or all-seeing of His servants. Then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised those who pray at night and fast during the day, and spend, particularly, He mentions particularly those who make istighfar during the last part of the night, and He says that Allah is a witness. He himself, he bears witness that none has a right to worship with him, and the angels and those who have been given knowledge. And this is and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has connected the people of knowledge to his name and to the angels, and this is a great honor. And also it shows you that ayat 18, it comes right after 17, praising those who are patient and those who give charity and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make istighfar at night. And that is a sign of true scholarship as well. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reinforces that the deen that Allah will accept is Islam. In Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah will not accept any other religion. That means those who came after the Prophet, every single Prophet was a Muslim, and they submitted to Allah in Tawheed, the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is reinforced particularly in the family of in Ali Imran, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the coming ayat that he had chose in the last of Adam wa Nuhan wa Ali Ibrahim wa Ali Imran, Adam, Noah, and Ibrahim, the family of Ibrahim and the family of Imran. He has chosen them over all mankind because of this Tawheed, and this is Islam, the epitome of Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then advises the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say, I'm for those who argue with him, to say, I have submitted my face to Allah and those who follow me. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a severe warning to those who disbelieve in his signs and kill the prophets and kill those who are commanding that which is good. So Allah warned them of a severe punishment, and that all their deeds will be abrogated, all their deeds will be wiped out and nullified, and they will be in the fire, and they will have no one to help them. And this is an indication that killing, of course, a prophet, or disbelieving in his signs, or in Allah's signs, ayat, any of his ayat, or the ahkam within the deen, or fighting, or even killing those who command that which is good because of the religion, all of these are signs of disbelief. So if a person kills someone because he's commanding that which is right, he kills someone because he is calling to the religion, then that is a sign that all of his deeds will be nullified, and he will be from the people of the fire forever. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of some of the lies and the fabrications of the people of the book. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, they say that the fire will not touch them except for a few days, and this is why they reject the Prophet, or they reject the truth when they're called to it. They've been given a portion of the book, and when they're called to Allah's judgment, they reject it because they believe that the fire will not touch them only for a few days. And this is something that they have lied. They fabricated lies against Allah, and then they fell into believing these lies. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions how would it be, ayat 25, when Allah gathers them to a day there is no doubt, and every soul will receive the outcome of his deeds, and they will not be wrong in the least. Ayah 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a beautiful dua, and it says, Allah, Qul Allahumma, say, O Allah, the King of all kings, or the King of the owner of the dominion, you give the kingship and position of authority to whom you will. You take it from whom you will. You raise, you elevate them in whom you will, and you debase whom you will. In your hands is all good, and your hand is all good, and you are able to do all things. You alternate the night into the day, and the day into the night, and you bring life from death, and death from life, and you provide whom you will without account. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits the believers from taking the disbelievers as allies in that which is harmful harmful to the believers. And he says, whoever does this, فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ, whoever takes the disbelievers and the foes of Allah as friends, and they fight the believers alongside, and they join in the camp of the disbelievers, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he cuts all ties with them. فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. And this is indication of that this action is an action of disbelief, and this is by consensus, and this is something that Shawkani rahimahullah, the great scholar of Yemen, and Imam al-Tabari, the third generation scholar of tafsir, and others agreed, and they said that there's no difference of opinion that this is an act of disbelief. May Allah save us. قُلْ إِن تُخْفُوا مَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ أَوْ تُبْدُوهُ يَعْلَمُهُ اللَّهُ. Say that which, if whatever you hold inside or express it, that Allah knows, and He knows that all that which is in the heaven and the earth. So Allah is reinforcing that the vastness of and the comprehensiveness of His knowledge and the inclusiveness of His knowledge. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that every soul on the day of judgment will find what everything they presented forward, everything that they did in their lives. They'll see it in a book, and they themselves will read their book. Allah says, "Iqra kitabak," read your book. You are enough as a witness against yourself. May Allah save us. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the challenge of love. If you truly love Him, Allah says, if you truly love me, then if you truly love Allah, then follow me, and Allah will in return love you. And this is the indication that obedience to Allah and His Messenger, following the Sunnah, is the greatest way. Following the Sunnah of the Prophet is the greatest means to achieve Allah's love. And this is ayat 31, Ali Imran. And Allah says, obey Allah and His Messenger, and if they turn away, indeed Allah does not love the kafirin. So this is how you achieve Allah's love, or lose Allah's love, billah, by following and obeying the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to mention the story of Ibrahim. This is of Ali Imran, and this is ayat 33, and speaks about the family of Imran, the mother of Maryam alayhi salam, Hinna bint Faquth. That's the name as mentioned in Tafsir ibn Kathir. Hinna bint Faquth, and she's the mother of Maryam alayhi salam, and how she once she made dua. She couldn't have children. She made dua that Allah will give her offspring, and then Allah blessed her with a child, and she thought it was she gave that child in servitude, a pledge that she would give that child in servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I mentioned how when she made the dua, oh Allah, she said, Inni nadartu laka ma fi batni, I have given this child in my womb for you as your service, so accept from me. And this is the importance of making dua for your children before they're born. And when she gave birth to that child, she said that it's a female, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reinforced that a male is different than a female, and she sought protection for Maryam alayhi salam from the evil of shaitan and her offspring, and that is a great dua. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this dua and raised her in a beautiful way. And Zakaria, who was the husband of Maryam's aunt, maternal aunt. So Zakaria alayhi salam was the husband, was married to Maryam's sister, and he took her in and raised her because she was given as service for the masjid, or at the time the kanisa, the place of worship. So Zakaria, every time when he would come to her, he would find that Allah provided her with a different kind of provision. And then he remembered, he saw this and remembered to make the dua, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also for children, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with children. So this surah is showing you so many different examples of Allah's ability, of Allah's of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create from nothing. He created Maryam was born from her mother was barren, and she gave birth. And Zakaria, his wife was barren, and he said Imra'ati aqir, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a child after seeing Maryam alayhi salam, such a righteous woman. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He asked for a sign. Ayat 41, He asked for a sign, and that sign was that he was not able to speak, and Allah gave him Yahya. And Yahya alayhi salam, as Allah said, obviously was the cousin of Isa alayhi salam, and they were a blessed family. And Allah, He said that he is a noble man, and he was someone who abstained from marriage, and he was a pious prophet. So you see the blessing in his family, that most of the family were not able to bear children, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them as a miracle, and how Allah, the greatest miracle in the family was that Maryam alayhi salam bore Isa without a father. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of how He purified. The angels came and told Maryam and gave her the glad tidings and commanded her to worship Allah. Uqnuti li rabbiki wasjudi, prostrate, bow down with those who bow down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to the Prophet that this is from the unseen, and you were not with them when they cast their pens. And this is because they saw that when Maryam came with Maryam, they all wanted, and they knew that Imran was their imam and their alim, and they wanted to take in this girl, this pious, they had the honor to take her in, and they went down to the river and they threw their pens in the water, and whatever pen floated or stood still and was not pushed down the river, then he deserved to take the child. And this was Zakaria alayhi salam, and she was raised with Zakaria and his wife. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how the angels gave glad tidings to Maryam alayhi salam of the coming of that Allah will bless her with a son, Isa, and the miracles that He would do, and how He would cure the leper and the blind by Allah's will, and Allah will teach him how to write and teach him the wisdom and teach him the Torah and the Injil. So Isa alayhi salam, he had the ability to write, and he knew the Torah, and he also he received the Injil. And other miracles, taking a clay and creating and breathing into it, and forming a bird and then breathing into it, and that bird comes alive. These are all from the signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Isa alayhi salam, and that also He came to make some things that were haram upon the children of Israel, to make it halal for them and to make the Sharia easier. And the most important da'wah, or the call of Isa alayhi salam, was Inna Allah Rabbi wa Rabbukum fa'budu, indeed Allah is my Lord and your Lord, so worship Him. After that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the story, mentioned when Isa alayhi salam, when they attempted to kill him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised that He would raise him and purify him from those who disbelieve, ayat 55, and make his followers, which include the disciples and also the Prophet, the Ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He would make them victorious and make them superior in truth at all the time, and in physical and military victory at different stages, sometimes until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then Allah promised him, ayat 56, that He will punish those who disbelieve with a severe punishment on the last day, and He will reward those give the reward those who believe and do righteous deeds. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "In ذَلِكَ نَتْلُو عَلَيْكَ مِنْ الْآيَاتِ وَالذِّكْرِ الْحَكِيمِ إِنَّ مَثَلَ عِيسَى عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ آدَمَ." We recite, these are the verses that we recite to you from the ayat and the wise dhikr, which is the Quran. Indeed, the example of Isa in the sight of Allah is that of Adam. He created him from dirt, and then He said to him, "Be," and he was. So if you think that Isa is the son of Allah because he has no father, then what do you say about Adam alayhi salatu wasalam? Allah Azza wa Jalla, He does what He pleases. He has not begotten any son. And this is the greatest message of the surah. Al-Haqqu min Rabbika. This is the truth from your Lord. فَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُمْتَرِينَ. Ayat 60. Do not be from those who doubt. And if they continue to doubt with you, to argue with you after these ayat and this clear history has come, confirming the truth of the past and clearing the misconceptions, if they continue to debate with you, then call them to mubahala, call them to make the dua of mubahala, the curse, the mutual curse, the call to your children and your wives and our children and our wives, and then we ask Allah to destroy and curse those who are lying against Him. Indeed, these are the stories of truth, and there is no God, no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and Allah is Al-Aziz Al-Hakim. This is ayat 62. And after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to call the people of the book to a word that is equal between us and them, and that is Tawheed, that we do not worship anyone but Allah, and nor do we associate any partners with Him, and we don't take each other as guides. In other words, you don't legislate for us something besides that which Allah wills, nor do we legislate for you something that Allah wills. In other words, we follow that legislation, we worship Allah alone, and we follow His legislation. And this is the da'wah, ayat 64. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to call them to. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ayat 65, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ لِمَ تُحَاجُّونَ. He refuting the people of the book, the Jews claiming that Ibrahim was a Jew or Christian, and they have no knowledge of this because Ibrahim came before them and he was the Imam of monotheism, and he did not worship anything besides Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains the belief of Ibrahim and those who deserve to be under his flag and associate with him. Those are those who follow him in his belief, and this is the Prophet clearly sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his ummah who followed Ibrahim alayhi salam down to the T, down to every aspect of his life. And this is why this ummah are the true followers of Ibrahim, and Muhammad is the great grandson of Ibrahim alayhi. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains how ayat 69, a group of them wish that they can lead you astray, and they only lead themselves astray. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O people of the book, why do you lie? Why do you mix the truth with falsehood? And you know. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining how some of the Jews in Medina tried their best to hide the truth. And some of them tried different things to get the companions to leave Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that they said, let's become Muslim in the beginning of the day, and then apostate so that perhaps we will weaken their faith. Ayat 72. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains some of the virtues of the people of the book, and this is from the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even though the majority of people of a group have gone astray, He still confirms the virtues of the few who maintain righteousness. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains how they change the book with their tongues and fabricate lies against Allah. And He goes on and speaks about the oath that He took, the covenant of the prophets. The covenant of the prophets is that if any of them hear that the Prophet Muhammad comes in their time, that they will obey him and follow him. And then that was a great oath that Allah took, ayat 81, that every single prophet knew of the coming of the Prophet Muhammad, and they took an oath with Allah that they will obey him and follow him if he happened to come in their time. And then after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, reaffirms the belief in Allah and His messengers and Ibrahim, that which we believe on, and say we believe in Allah and that which was revealed to us, and Ibrahim and Ismail and Ishaq and Yaqub and the tribes, and that was given to Musa and Isa alayhi salam, as mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. With that, we alhamdulillah finished the third juz, and the last thing Allah mentions on the last page 61, is how the warning of those who apostate from the religion of Ibrahim and how they will be in the fire forever. May Allah save us and let us die upon Tawheed. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.